So my part that deals with how the Islamic population is viewed today and the stereotypes that go along with the population. So when I was researching how the Islamic population is viewed in our society today, the term Islamization came up. And Islamization is pretty much the pressure created by anti-women laws in some parts of the Muslim world, where women with some degree of education and awareness are beginning to realize that religion has been and continues to be used as an instrument of oppression rather than a means of liberation. So, to me, that doesn't mean that Islamization is necessarily good, just because it says an instrument of oppression rather than liberation. So, upon my research, I've read that Muslims pretty much think of modernity in two ways. The first way is that modernization, which is associated with science, technology, and material progress, and two, as westernization, which is associated with promiscuity and all kinds of social problems ranging from latchkey kids to drug and alcohol abuse. And reading into what modernization versus being westernized means, it's that emancipated Muslim women are seen by many as a symbol of westernization and not modernization. Reading further into the article that I found about modernization and westernization, it said that girls and boys go to a Western institution for higher education, but when they come back, the boys are seen as modernized while the girls are seen as westernized. And that this is because traditional Muslim societies see girls as being violated. They consider there to be a necessary boundary between private space, which is where they think the women belong, versus public space, where they think men belong. I guess it's viewed as highly dangerous for a woman to be in a man's space, and that they think that modernization is highly desirable, whereas being westernized, it's equally undesirable. To me, this whole modernization versus westernization, reading through it and internalizing it, to me, it means that, when women try to get, higher education, they come back, it's looked at as, they did something wrong, and that they're not going to be necessarily accepted by their family or their peers just because they got the same higher education as the men did. But I feel like that is a common thing within different populations around the world. And so I see a commonality between Islamic population and other populations around the world. For another resource for my part of this project, I decided to interview my friend Hannah. Her parents were born in Bosnia, and so their faith is Muslim. And I thought, what better to get an overview of how the Islamic population is viewed today and their stereotypes, than to interview my friend Hannah and her family. So I just did like an email interview with her, and I asked her if there were any stereotypes within the Muslim culture, and if she, what her take on being viewed by our society was. And she said that she would say that stereotypes are very prude, and the initial thought when someone sees us is that they are scared because they think we're all terrorists. Headscarves, all their bodies are covered all the time, all the men grow beards, and as a group, our society looks at them like they're terrorists. From my point of view, because I'm not from the Islamic population or Islamic faith, I think that whole issue goes back to what happened on 9/11, and I did some research on that, and the article that I found said that pre-9/11, Muslims weren't really viewed nicely, but it escalated drastically after 9/11. I definitely can see where the correlation between those are, but I think that this is a problem. I know that I've seen in the news that there were shootings at a Muslim worship center not that long ago, and I feel that since 9/11, Muslim and Islamic populations are being viewed negatively within our society, and I don't really think that that's gonna get better. So then my next question for Hannah was, are there things that are viewed as stereotypes for gender roles? I mainly wanted to know what stereotypical gender roles for this particular population was. And she said that the females do the housework, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids while the husband goes out and works. Females do not date. If you date, it means you're marrying them. I found this very interesting. They don't date. They will, if you date, like, you're going to marry them, which I find really odd just because of how, like, I grew up. That just seems weird, but I can also see a correlation between this particular aspect of Islamic faith with others. I know there's like arranged marriages and other cultures and stuff like that. I know just from knowing Hannah and her family, they don't really date outside of the Islamic faith. If they do, it's viewed negatively by their family, and it's almost like they're disowned. I think disowned is a bad word to use, but that's the only word I can think of at the moment. It's like they disown them. And I know for Hannah is the first generation of her family that was not born in Bosnia. And Hannah is dating, and her parents really aren't enforcing the whole you don't date unless you're marrying them rule. And I know Hannah has talked about how when her family comes to visit, her boyfriend has to leave and can't be around just because of that. Her boyfriend's not of Muslim faith, and how negatively her family would view that whole relationship. So her and her parents have just found it easier to, when her family comes around, that Hannah's relationship does not really exist or anything. I really liked getting Hannah's view of it because I feel like I can read articles all day and research, but get a first-hand opinion on the Islamic population I think it's cool. I think it adds a personal story almost behind it, because I know for me, Hannah is my only friend that is of Muslim faith and is from the Islamic population. Before I met her, I had never really had any interaction with someone of Muslim faith, and I mean, when I interact with Hannah, I don't think of any of these stereotypes. I don't think she's a terrorist. None of that has ever crossed my mind. So I just think that it's ridiculous, and that society makes up these outrageous correlations. It's like saying that all Muslims must be terrorists because of what happened with 9/11 and all that. But I found it interesting that Hannah mentioned headscarves. And so I found an article that talks about the scarf, which I guess is called a hijab. And I know I'm probably mispronouncing that, and I'm so sorry. But it said that the public perception of Islam is that it's a bad religion, promoting violence and oppression of women. For the women in this particular study, the hijab symbolizes neither oppression nor terrorism, but purity and modesty and women's Islamic identity and obedience or submission to God, and a testament that you're Muslim. The article stated that the women that Catherine Bullock interviewed, they felt peaceful in their hijab, and they loved wearing it. What little I know about the wearing of the hijabs is that they wear them to cover up anything, to be modest, and that only, if I'm correct, only your husband really gets to see you without that on. So it's kind of like you're leaving, you're being very modest, and you're not revealing any part of yourself except for to your husband, which goes back to submission to God and being a testament of your faith. I found this article really interesting. Before I had read it, I didn't know anything about the hijab. I knew basically like why they wore them, to be modest, and that only their husbands could see them without it. But reading it about how the women, they felt peaceful and they felt, connected to their faith. I really like that. I think it's important that people out there, they stick to their faith if they have it, and don't let society try to bully them or try to add stereotypes to them, that they're doing it because it makes them happy and it fulfills something within them that's related to their religion. Overall, I learned a lot from researching about how the Islamic population is viewed today and their stereotypes. I learned things like if they date, or that they don't date without the intention of being married, and I didn't know that they really couldn't date outside of their faith. Those were really the main things that I learned. I didn't know there was a difference between being modernized or being westernized, and that there's a negative connotation to men going and getting a higher education versus the women going and getting the same higher education. In my opinion, I don't understand why they go if their family and people within their faith is just going to look at them negatively. But overall, I found this whole research interesting, and I can now use that in my future career.